The night he came back, he stood in my doorway like a stranger who knew my name, but not my heart. I remember thinking how quiet the house felt behind me, the kind of quiet you earn after surviving something loud. He didn't knock at first. He just stood there, shoulders slumped, eyes searching my face like he expected me to slam the door or fall apart. I did neither. I held the doorframe with one hand, felt the cool wood against my palm, and waited for him to speak. "Can we talk?" he asked. His voice was softer than I remembered, or maybe my ears had changed. That moment, that pause between his question and my answer, is where my story truly begins. Before all of this, before the leaving and the begging and the secret that would later sit between us like a live wire, my life was simple in the way grown women's lives often are. Not perfect, just steady. I had been married to Marcus for 22 years, long enough to know the rhythm of his footsteps, long enough to tell his moods by how he closed the car door. We lived in a modest brick house with a narrow porch and a creaky step that always gave you away if you came home late, the kind of house that smells like coffee in the morning and lemon cleaner on Saturdays. I worked as an office coordinator at a small medical clinic, nothing glamorous, but honest work. I liked knowing the doctors depended on me, that the phones would ring unanswered if I wasn't there. Marcus worked in logistics, a job that came with long hours and longer complaints. We didn't have children. That was a quiet grief we learned not to poke too often. Instead, we poured ourselves into routine. Sunday grocery runs, weeknight dinners eaten in front of the news, occasional arguments about money that never went anywhere dangerous. From the outside, people said we were solid, and for a long time I believed that meant safe. The first thing that changed wasn't big. It never is. Marcus started talking about peace. Not vacations or rest, peace. He'd sit at the edge of the bed at night, rubbing his temples, saying things like, "I'm tired of noise," or "I just want a simpler life." At first, I thought he meant work stress. I suggested a weekend away. I bought him a new pillow. I listened. But his idea of peace seemed to exclude me. He started staying out late, claiming he needed long drives to clear his head. He stopped asking about my day. Our dinners grew quieter, not tense, just empty. Forks scraping plates, the clock ticking louder than conversation. One evening, as I stood at the stove stirring a pot of beans, he said it plainly. "I think I need to leave." I turned the burner down too fast. The flame hissed in protest. "Where?" I asked, already knowing that the answer wouldn't make sense. "I don't know yet," he said. "I just know I can't keep living like this." Like what? I wanted to ask. Like a married man with a wife who loved him? He didn't mention another woman. He didn't raise his voice. He spoke like a man announcing the weather, inevitable, inconvenient, out of his control. "I need peace," he said again, as if repeating it would make it holy. When he packed his things, he took fewer shirts than I expected. He left behind books, old photographs, the mug his mother gave him years ago. I watched from the hallway as he zipped the suitcase, my hands folded so tightly my knuckles ached. "Are you seeing someone else?" I finally asked. He paused just long enough for hope to flicker. "No," he said, "this isn't about that." That was the first lie. I didn't know it yet, but my body did. My stomach tightened in a way it hadn't before, like it was bracing for impact. After he left, the house changed, or maybe it just revealed itself. I slept in the center of the bed at first, then drifted back to my side out of habit. I learned which floorboards no longer creaked because no one walked on them anymore. I cooked smaller meals and still made too much rice. People told me I was handling it well. "You're so strong," my sister said on the phone. But strength, I learned, is often just silence practiced daily. Weeks turned into months. Marcus called occasionally, brief, polite check-ins. He talked about how clear his mind felt now, how he was renting a small place, how quiet his evenings were. He never asked if I was lonely. I never told him that the silence he wanted had settled into my bones. Then the calls stopped. I assumed he'd found the peace he was looking for, or something close enough. I focused on rebuilding myself in small ways. I repainted the guest room. I joined a Saturday morning walking group. I learned how to sit with my own thoughts without immediately reaching for the television. I was learning how to live without him. So that's why when he showed up at my door that night, months later, thinner and hollow-eyed, my first feeling wasn't anger, it was dread. Because men don't come back like that unless something has gone terribly wrong. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. The air between us felt heavier than memory. He sat on the couch, not his old spot, and stared at his hands. I noticed how his fingers trembled slightly, how his shoes were scuffed like he'd been pacing more than walking. "I messed up," he said. I said nothing. "There's something you need to know," he continued, his voice dropping. "But before I tell you, I need you to promise something." That's when I felt it, the shift, the moment when my life tilted again, not into loss this time, but into power. "What do you need me to promise?" I asked. He looked up, eyes glassy with fear. "I need you to promise you won't tell anyone." The clock on the wall ticked between us, and I knew right then that the peace he left me for had finally come for him. I didn't answer him right away. When Marcus asked me to promise silence, I felt something steady settle inside my chest. Not love, not rage, but clarity. The kind that comes when you realize the ground has shifted and you're no longer standing where you used to beg. "I don't make promises before I know what they cost," I said finally. He nodded quickly, like a man already drowning who was grateful for any pause. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and rubbed his face hard enough to leave red marks. "I didn't leave just for peace," he said. There it was, the truth stepping out of the shadows, slow and deliberate. "There was someone else," he continued. "Her name is Alina. I met her through work. She listened to me. Everything felt lighter with her." I stared at the framed photo on the shelf behind him, the two of us at my cousin's wedding years ago, smiling in borrowed sunlight. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. "How long?" I asked. "A year," he said, then quieter, "before I left." A year. That meant every quiet dinner, every late drive, every conversation about peace had been shared with someone else first. I felt the sting then, sharp but contained, like touching something hot and pulling back before it burned through. "So what happened?" I asked. His shoulders sagged. "She's pregnant." The word hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. I closed my eyes for a moment, not to steady myself, but to honor the woman I had been who once dreamed of hearing that word spoken in our home. When I opened them again, that woman felt far away, like someone I used to know. "And you want me to hide this?" I said. He nodded, too fast. "She doesn't know everything," he rushed on, "about us, about the timing, and my job. If this comes out the wrong way, it could ruin me. Alina's family is complicated. They don't know she was involved with a married man." I finally looked at him then, really looked. The man who had left me to find peace now sat on my couch asking me to protect his chaos. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" I said. He swallowed. "I'm asking for grace," he replied. I turned around. "No," I said calmly, "you're asking me to lie so you can keep being comfortable." He didn't argue. That told me everything. I asked him to leave shortly after. I told him I needed time. He nodded, relieved I hadn't shouted or thrown him out. At the door, he paused. "I never meant to hurt you." "I know," I replied, and I did. That didn't make it better. After he left, I sat in the dark living room and let the truth settle. I didn't cry that night. I felt something colder, resolve. Over the next few days, pieces started clicking into place. his sudden desire for peace, his careful avoidance of timelines, the way he'd framed himself as a man choosing simplicity instead of one running from consequences. I realized then that the lie wasn't just to protect him, it was to erase me. If I stayed silent, I wouldn't just be the abandoned wife. I'd become a footnote, a convenient past edited out of his new beginning. That understanding changed everything. I didn't rush into action. I've learned that waiting can be powerful when everyone else is scrambling. Marcus texted me daily, short messages at first, just checking in, then longer ones, apologies layered with fear. He reminded me of our history, our shared years, the sacrifices we'd made together. He spoke as if memory itself should bind my tongue. I never agreed to anything. Instead, I listened. One afternoon, he called me from a number I didn't recognize. His voice was tight. "Alina wants to meet you," he said. I laughed once, a soft, surprised sound that seemed to startle him. "She wants to thank you," he added quickly, "for being understanding." Understanding. When? I asked. Saturday. I hung up and sat with that for a long time. Saturday came with bright skies and an unexpected calm. I chose my clothes carefully, nothing dramatic, nothing fragile. I wore the earrings Marcus once said made me look grounded. I smiled at that thought. We met at a small cafe near the river. Alina was younger than me, but not by much. She had kind eyes and nervous hands. When she saw me, she stood too quickly and almost knocked her chair back. "Thank you for coming," she said. I nodded and sat across from her. Marcus hovered nearby, tense and silent. She talked about how complicated things had been, about how she hadn't known he was still married when they first got close, about the baby. She touched her stomach without realizing it. "I just wanted to say I appreciate your maturity," she said finally. "Not everyone would handle this with such grace." I took a sip of my tea. "I haven't handled anything yet," I said. Marcus stiffened. "What do you mean?" I set my cup down gently. "I mean, I haven't decided who I'm going to be in this story." The silence that followed was thick and unmistakable. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time since he left, I saw fear cross his face. Real fear. Not of losing me, of losing control of the narrative. And in that moment, I knew my silence was no longer a favor. It was a choice. After that meeting, Marcus stopped texting. Not immediately. At first there were a few stiff messages, "Are you okay?" and "We should talk." But the tone had changed. The entitlement was gone. What replaced it was caution. That's how I knew the balance had shifted. I went back to my life, or what passed for it, with a new awareness. Every interaction felt sharper. I noticed how often women are expected to absorb damage quietly so men can move on clean. How silence is praised as maturity, but only when it benefits someone else. At work, I filed paperwork and answered phones, but my mind was busy sorting truth from obligation. I didn't want revenge. I wanted alignment, for my actions to match my worth. 2 weeks later, Marcus called again. This time, he didn't ease into it. "Alina's parents are asking questions," he said. "They want to know why the divorce isn't finalized yet." I leaned against the kitchen counter, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space where patience used to live. "And?" I said. "And I told them we were already emotionally separated before I met her," he replied. "But they want details, dates." Dates. Always dates. Truth has a way of demanding specificity. "You shouldn't have said anything without talking to me," I said. "You didn't have a choice," he snapped, then caught himself. "Please, I just need you to back me up." There it was again. Just. As if what he was asking required nothing from me. "Marcus," I said quietly, "you left me without explanation. You lied for a year. and now you want me to help you lie better." Silence crackled on the line. "If you don't help me," he said finally, "this could get ugly." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "It already did," I replied, and hung up. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months. The next morning, I made an appointment with a lawyer. I didn't tell Marcus. I didn't need to. This wasn't about blindsiding him. It was about grounding myself in reality instead of reacting to his panic. The lawyer was a woman around my age, calm and direct. She listened without interruption as I laid everything out: the affair, the separation, the pregnancy, the request for silence. "You don't owe him anything," she said when I finished. "Not legally, not morally." I nodded. I already knew that, but hearing it out loud felt like stepping into sunlight after being indoors too long. "What do you want?" she asked. The question surprised me. No one had asked it so plainly in months. "I want to stop disappearing in his story," I said. She smiled. "Then we proceed honestly." Word travels in ways we can't always trace. Within days of filing, Marcus showed up again, unannounced, eyes wide, voice tight with desperation. "They know," he said as soon as I opened the door. "Who?" I asked. "Alina's parents, my boss, everyone." I stepped aside and let him in, not because I felt sorry for him, but because I was no longer afraid of what he might say. He paced the living room, hands running through his hair. "They think I lied," he said. "They think I used her." I watched him carefully. "Did you?" I asked. He stopped pacing. "That's not the point," he said. I nodded. "It is to them." He turned to me then, eyes sharp with accusation. "You could have stopped this," he said, "if you'd just kept quiet." I felt something lift off my chest, the last remnant of guilt I hadn't realized I was carrying. "I did keep quiet," I said, "for months. That was your head start." His face changed then. The anger gave way to something smaller. "They're saying they don't want me around the baby unsupervised," he said, voice cracking. "They think I'm unstable." I didn't respond. "They want proof I'm not the kind of man who lies to get what he wants," he continued. "You could help me with that." I met his gaze steadily. "I already helped you," I said. "I showed them exactly who you are." He sank onto the couch, defeated. For a moment, just a moment, I felt a flicker of something like pity, but it passed quickly. Pity without accountability is just another form of erasure. "I never thought you'd do this," he said quietly. I sat across from him. "I never thought you'd ask me to disappear." He stayed for a while longer, talking in circles. I listened, not to soothe him, but to mark the end of something. When he finally left, he didn't ask to come back. The days that followed were quieter, but not empty. People started reaching out. Mutual friends who'd heard pieces of the story. A cousin who'd suspected something but didn't want to interfere. Even Alina sent a message. She didn't apologize. She thanked me. For telling the truth, she wrote, even when it made things harder. I stared at the message for a long time. Truth has a way of burning at first, I realized, but it also clears the air. And for the first time since Marcus left, the quiet in my house felt earned, not imposed. The public fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in ripples. First, it was the sideways looks at the grocery store. People I'd known for years pausing just a second too long, deciding whether to speak. Then the phone calls started. Careful voices, half questions disguised as concern. "I heard you and Marcus are figuring things out? I hope you're doing okay, sweetheart." I answered honestly, without offering details. I'd learned that truth doesn't need decoration. It stands on its own. Marcus, on the other hand, unraveled quickly. He called me one evening, his voice hoarse, like he'd been shouting into rooms that no longer echoed back. "My boss put me on leave," he said. "They're saying the situation is a distraction." I sat at the small table by the window, the one I'd recently cleared of old mail and forgotten keys. Outside, a neighbor's wind chimes tapped softly, steady and unbothered. "I'm sorry," I said, "and I meant it in the way you're sorry a storm knocked over a tree, even if the roots were already rotten." He continued, "They think I'm reckless, that I make bad decisions under pressure." I thought of all the times I'd absorbed his pressure for him, smoothed his days, carried his moods, swallowed my questions. "That must be hard," I said. He exhaled sharply. "You sound so calm." "I am," I replied, and that surprised us both. A week later, the divorce paperwork moved forward, clean, direct, no theatrics. The lawyer handled communication, which gave me room to breathe again. Each signature felt like setting something down that I'd been carrying without realizing how heavy it was. Alina reached out again, this time asking if we could talk, just the two of us. We met at a park near the river. She looked tired. Pregnancy has a way of revealing truths no one can hide from. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said, before I could speak. "I just need to understand." I nodded. "Ask." She hesitated. "Did he ever tell you he loved you when he was with me?" The question caught me off guard, not because it hurt, but because it felt oddly irrelevant now. "Yes," I said, "but love isn't proof of honesty." She pressed her lips together. "I thought I was choosing peace," she said quietly. I watched the water move past us, unbothered by our confessions. "So did he," I said. "But peace built on someone else's silence never lasts." She cried then, not loudly, just enough to let something go. I didn't reach for her hand. Compassion doesn't always require touch. As spring turned into summer, my life settled into a rhythm that felt like mine alone. I repainted the bedroom a soft, forgiving color. I replaced the couch Marcus had slouched into for years. I stopped waiting for my phone to ring. One afternoon, my sister came over with takeout and curiosity. "I don't know how you stayed so composed," she said, between bites. "I would have blown everything up." I smiled. I did, just not loudly. That night, Marcus sent one last message. "I hope you're happy," it read. I stared at it for a long time before typing back. "I'm honest," I wrote. "That's better." He never replied. Months later, I heard through someone else that he'd moved again. Smaller place, different job, limited contact with the baby, supervised and careful. The peace he chased now came with rules and witnesses. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. Healing, I learned, isn't about winning. It's about no longer needing to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. I still wake up early on Sundays. I still make too much rice sometimes, but the silence in my house is no longer heavy. It's spacious. It lets me hear myself think. And when I think back to the night Marcus stood in my doorway asking me to hide his secret, I understand something I didn't then. He wasn't asking for peace. He was asking for permission. And this time, I didn't give it. After everything settled, the paperwork, the conversations, the quiet confirmations that the chapter was truly closing, I expected some grand feeling to arrive. Relief, joy, maybe even triumph. What came instead was something softer. Space. Healing didn't announce itself. It showed up in small, almost forgettable moments. The first time I realized I hadn't checked my phone all morning. The first time I laughed at something on television without that dull ache in my chest. The first time I rearranged a room without considering whether someone else would like it. I started walking again, not with the Saturday group this time, but alone. Early mornings, just as the sun was figuring out what kind of day it wanted to be. The air smelled like damp earth and fresh starts. I liked that no one expected conversation from me. I liked the sound of my own footsteps. People often think healing looks like becoming harder, colder, more guarded. But for me, it was the opposite. I became more honest, especially with myself. I admitted things I'd avoided for years, that I had ignored signs because I was afraid of starting over, that I had mistaken endurance for loyalty, that I had believed peace meant keeping things quiet, even when they were wrong. One afternoon, I was cleaning out the hall closet when I found Marcus's old jacket, the one he used to wear on chilly nights, the pockets still holding a receipt and a loose button. For a moment, memory rose up. Not pain exactly, but familiarity. I held the jacket, then folded it neatly and placed it in a donation bag. Letting go didn't feel dramatic. It felt respectful. At work, I noticed changes too. I spoke up more in meetings. I stopped apologizing before making requests. My supervisor pulled me aside one day and said, "You seem lighter." I smiled. I put something down. Not everyone understood my calm. Some people wanted me angrier, louder. They wanted a story with sharper edges so they could place me neatly into victimhood or victory. But life isn't tidy like that. Marcus didn't become a monster overnight, and I didn't become a hero. We became who our choices revealed us to be. Once, months later, I ran into him unexpectedly at the pharmacy. He looked older, tired in a way rest doesn't fix. We nodded at each other, polite, distant, complete. As I walked away, I felt no urge to explain, accuse, or revisit. The past stayed where it belonged. That was how I knew I'd healed, not because it no longer mattered, but because it no longer needed me. In the evenings now, I sit on the porch with a cup of tea, listening to the neighborhood settle. I watch lights turn on in other people's homes and think about how many stories are unfolding quietly behind those walls. I don't rush peace anymore. I let it come to me. Sometimes I think about the question Marcus asked that night, the promise he wanted before telling me the truth. How close I came to saying yes out of habit, out of love for who I thought we were. But silence is not the same as grace, and truth doesn't need permission. If there's one thing this chapter taught me, it's this. You don't owe anyone your silence just because they're uncomfortable with the consequences of their own choices. Choosing honesty didn't make my life easier. It made it mine. Sometimes, late at night, I sit with the quiet and think about how easily my story could have gone another way. If I had agreed to stay silent, if I had chosen comfort over truth, if I had let someone else decide how my life would be remembered. I think many women stand at that same door I stood at, holding it open with one hand, holding themselves together with the other, being asked to protect a secret that was never theirs to carry. And I wonder how many of us were taught that peace means swallowing our pain so others can sleep at night. What I learned is this. Peace that requires your silence is not peace at all. It's erasure. Real peace doesn't come from hiding the truth. It comes from finally standing in it, even when your voice shakes, even when the outcome is uncertain. I didn't lose my marriage that night Marcus walked away. I lost it the moment I stopped mattering in his version of the story. And I found myself again the moment I refused to disappear. If you're listening to this and you're standing at your own doorway, unsure whether to speak or stay quiet, I hope you remember this. You are not cruel for telling the truth. You are not bitter for choosing dignity. And you are not wrong for protecting your own peace. So let me ask you, what would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have stayed silent or chosen yourself? If this story moved you, please let me know in the comments. Thank you for listening, for supporting this channel, and for holding space for stories like mine. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because there are many more truths still waiting to be told.